Uh, Hello, everybody. I'm Julio. I'm a PhD. I have a PhD in linguistics by Universidade Federal de São Carlos from Brazil, and master in history and bachelor in history as well from Unesp, São Paulo, Brazil. And I'm trying to understand now in a new research project some aspects of the authoritarian discourse rising in Latin America. And from this, I'm developing some ideas, and one of those ideas is to understand Bolsonaro's authoritarian discourse. So I present here some ideas in a first glance, in a moment that is in a starting idea of a new product. So in this present work, I intend to analyze briefly how the political discourse of the current president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, is based on hate speech and exaltation of violence. So I will start now, and if you can hear me okay, and if the connection is not so good, because I hear it's 4 a.m.
It's fine.
It's fine, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll continue. So with this work, I seek to understand how it's possible to see in Bolsonaro discourse, with examples from before and during his government, elements of hate speech that give impetus to his electoral base to support far-right ideas, create radicalism in Brazilian society. So the first problem is Bolsonaro is producing for a long time hate speaks, and in a lot of statements we can see a far-right wing in Brazil growing. So Bolsonaro is some of the mentors that make it possible to develop the far-right ideas in Brazil. And just to let's see. Okay. So to define hate speech, I use some theoretical Waldron, as for instance. Hate speech once materialized in statements that circulate publicly according to means of dissemination and transmission media used, express and generates harmful effects over time, reverberating in social practice. So the idea of the hate speech is we can see effects in the society. So you transform the society with speech. So it's like a dialectical mode. The discourse that presuppose hate speech generate effects over time in the society. Whoever produces hate speech aims to offend, to humiliate, or generate fear in a target public. It's a way to exclude them from some kind of participation and political belonging due to their specific characteristics. So you can see some specific groups like LGBT that Bolsonaro attacks directly, and left-wing parties. So the socialists or the left-wing parties are radically attacked by Bolsonaro. So cultural ideals and political ideals, characteristics that englobe these groups are object of hate. So in general terms, hate speech produces a devaluation, and exclusionary discrimination of the other. And this type of discourse produces damage, affecting groups of people in a diffuse way. It's an incentive to violence, which reflects, in the case of Bolsonarism, an authoritarian thought. Because I can have to here. Okay. So have this in mind. I will try to illustrate with few capital examples. I know I choose just few examples because the presentation is not so long. How Bolsonaro's political discourse becomes a true propaganda of attack against his opponents. For example, Partido dos Trabalhadores, the Working Party in Brazil, denoting a discourse that presents clear aspects of hate and violence. So I start now with the examples that I try to analyze. In an interview on March 13th of 2017 with the journalist Thais Belenque from the newspaper Folha de São Paulo, when Bolsonaro had already been proposed as a pre-candidate for the presidency of Brazil, he is asked about his violent speech. Belenque said, "Do you think it's constructive to adopt a violent discourse?" And Bolsonaro answered, "You don't deal with violence using love, you fight it with fists. If a bandit has a pistol, we need to have a rifle then." So that's a first example that illustrates how Bolsonaro assumes himself as a person who is violent, who uses violent discourse, and the violence is the principal, the main tool used in his discourse. Continuing with the other, perhaps the most well-known episode of exaltation of violence and hate speech during Bolsonaro's time as a deputy and in pre-campaign was when he declared his vote in the parliamentary session of the impeachment process of the ex-president Dilma Rousseff in May of 2016. The statement is, "For the memory of Colonel Carlos Alberto Brilhante Ustra, the dread of Dilma Rousseff. He acts in a double offensive way. He exalts torture during the period of the Brazilian military dictatorship, symbolized in the figure of Colonel Ustra, a famous Brazilian torturer. In addition, Bolsonaro offends Dilma Rousseff by bringing up the name of the person who tortured her during the period when she was arrested by the military dictatorship. The very choice of the term dread denotes a clear offense in intention to violently reach the person of Dilma Rousseff, triggering this memory." So we can see in this example clearly how Bolsonaro used words to offend, to humiliate the other. And in this case of Dilma Rousseff was very exemplary, because the audience in this session of the impeachment was completely huge audience, and he launched his candidacy during this time in 2016, going around Brazil to a lot of cities and spreading his ideology of far right. And this capital statement, the exaltation of Colonel Ustra, was so important in this moment that a book published by Colonel Ustra, an autobiography that Colonel Ustra wrote, was a bestseller, given the importance of the Bolsonaro's statement. So people from far right wing started to buy the book of Colonel Ustra, that was a clear exaltation to violence and torture during the military dictatorship in Brazil. So this is an important example of how hate speech can produce produce affects that people used to concord with it, some addiction in the case of Brazil. And continuing, apart from statements that expose violence involving praise of military dictatorship, tortures, and death, Bolsonaro also produced statements against minorities, such as the LGBT community, as in an interview to TV Câmara. This channel is a state channel, TV Câmara, in a program. When Bolsonaro was interviewed, he said, "If your son starts turning a little gay, he has to be beaten so he changed his behavior. All right. So this type of public speak highlights a specific type of violence that Bolsonaro incurs, which can clearly be defined as hate speak. And this statement was largely used during the campaign of 2018. So these statements attacking the left-wing party, mostly PT, Partido dos Trabalhadores, and LGBT community. These statements were completely used by his electoral base during the elections of 2018. During his presidential campaign in 2018, Bolsonaro maintained the same discourse line of violence. In one of his visits to the state of Acre on September 1st, Acre is a state in Brazil, a small state and poor state in north of Brazil. Bolsonaro said, "We are going to shoot the petralhada here in Acre. I put these dodgers to run from Acre." It's clearly an incentive to practice violence in which an adversary is identified and a solution to stop them. Firing squad. Petralhada is a pejorative and offensive way of referring to members of the PT Workers' Party and Bolsonaro's main competitor in the elections of 2018. In 2018, the governor of Acre, the state of Acre, was Tião Viana, who is from Partido dos Trabalhadores. So Bolsonaro was there, and referring to the working party members that ruled the state of Acre. So Bolsonaro was trying to say, he said after that, he was trying to say that we are going to beat the PT, the Workers' Party here in Acre. But the way he used the words was completely violent. And he was using a microphone symbolizing a gun, a weapon, during this moment he was saying this statement. So this is a clear example of how Bolsonaro attacked his adversary, producing hate speech. And another one during his period as president, on 29th of July, in the last year, we have another example of Bolsonaro's speech extolling violence. A homeless person stabbed 2 people in Rio de Janeiro, and there wasn't anyone armed to shoot him. He's a president of the Republic, declaring himself in favor of the death penalty, proving once again defending violence as a method to organize society, therefore not prioritizing the determinations and guarantees of justice for an individual. So he, as a president of the Republic, couldn't say that kind of statement. So he incurs in producing hate speech and in being a part of the legality and justice. So to briefly compare these statements, we can see a stability in the proportion that represents the voters of Bolsonaro in 2018, over 1/3 of the total Brazilian voting population, with the popular conception on subjects that lead to an extremist view of the use of violence. A study in 2016, that is 2 years before Bolsonaro's candidacy, already pointed out that 1/3 of Brazilians supported military intervention. So we have a lot of polls and agents that pointed out that some values like military dictatorship, military intervention was supported by a large part of Brazilian population. Along the same line, according to 2018 survey, still 1/3 of the population evaluates the period of the military dictatorship as positive, and maintaining the proportion, also 1/3 in a favor of giving the government the power to arrest suspects of crimes without authorization from the justice system. On top of that, according to the same survey, 15% support the use of methods of torturing suspects to obtain information on crimes. In addition, there is a parliamentary political representation in the National Congress which symbolize the defense of a violent culture synthesized on weapons, which is the parliamentary weapon front, also known as the bullet bench. So what I'm trying to say here is Bolsonaro, with a lot of use of hate speech, has a solid basis on society that endorse violent speech. In this sense, Bolsonaro's election and his government are a reflection of the rise of far-right discourse, and Brazil is an epicenter of what we see in many countries around the world today. In short, we intended here to bring some questions that help us to look critically the fact that a politician like Jair Bolsonaro has reached the most important posts of power in a republic. His hate speech build a threat to democratic values, to constitutional guarantees, to the integrity of some groups, and ultimately leading to an escalation of the far right on the stage of the political debates. So that's my presentation. It was very briefly. I tried to bring some example of hate speech in Bolsonaro's discourse.